Two fighters, £100 million each, £200 million in total. That is the purse for Fury versus Joshua, the biggest financial event in British boxing history. A fight that Netflix has paid an enormous upfront rights fee to broadcast. A fight that will fill Wembley Stadium, 90,000 people, and generate gate revenue alone that most Premier League clubs will never see in a single season. Here's the part that should stop you. Neither man is a world champion. Tyson Fury is 37 years old. Anthony Joshua is 36. Both men have been beaten. Both men have lost titles. Both men walking into this fight on the back of defeats, because we're not counting the Jake Paul fight. And they are each being paid £100 million, more than most Premier League clubs earn in total revenue across an entire season. So the question this episode is going to answer is not who wins, it's this. How does a fight between two men who are not champions, who are in the final years of their careers, end up with £200 million? The answer is not what you think. The fight is not worth £200 million, despite the fact that it nearly died 4 separate times in over 6 years. It's worth £200 million because of exactly that. To understand the number, you need to go back to one night. April 29th, 2017. Wembley Stadium. Anthony Joshua versus Vladimir Klitschko. 90,000 people. A post-war record for boxing in Britain. Joshua won spectacularly in the 11th round, and the fight felt like it reignited British boxing. Now look at what that one night was worth. £50 million in total revenue. Over 1.5 million pay-per-view buys. A domestic record. The previous biggest British boxing event had generated £22 million. Joshua and Klitschko nearly doubled it in one night. One fight, one night, and the people who understood money, the promoters, the broadcasters, the Saudi entertainment executives, they were beginning to pay attention. And they all saw the same thing. If Joshua versus Klitschko could do 50 million, what would Joshua versus Fury do? That was the question. But the answer would take 6 years to find out. Joshua and Fury did not invent this. Floyd Mayweather did. Mayweather versus Pacquiao, May 2015. A fight that the boxing world had been demanding for over 5 years. $400 million in pay-per-view revenue alone. Mayweather personally earned $240 million in a single night. The blueprint was simple. Build anticipation. Delay the fight. Let demand grow. Then cash in. The longer the wait, the larger the audience. The larger the audience, the larger the number. Mayweather versus Pacquiao took 5 years to make. Fury versus Joshua would take 6. And here is what nobody realized while it was happening. Every time the fight collapsed, every time it died, the demand didn't disappear. It compounded, over and over again. Back in 2019, both camps were in negotiations. Both sides were agreeing in principle. The fight was getting close. Then, on the 1st of June 2019, Anthony Joshua stepped into the ring against Andy Ruiz Jr. at Madison Square Garden. Ruiz was a late replacement, given almost no chance. The bookmakers had Joshua as a heavy favourite, and it was the start of a new journey for Joshua fighting in the USA, specifically chasing the money. Joshua was knocked down, then knocked down again, and stopped in the 7th round. One of the biggest upsets in heavyweight boxing history. In a single night, the commercial landscape collapsed. Joshua was no longer champion. The fight lost its foundation completely. Dead. Just like that. Now ask the question that this episode keeps returning to. What happened to the demand? It didn't go away. The boxing public watched Joshua go to Saudi Arabia 6 months later, reclaim his titles, and rebuild. If anything, the story became more compelling. A champion who fell, who had to prove himself again before the biggest fight of his career. Death number 1. And the first deposit into a 6-year accumulation of public demand. This is the one that most people don't know, and it's the moment that this story becomes something else entirely. Back in 2021, Joshua had his titles back. Fury was the WBC heavyweight champion. Both men were at the peak of the sport, both free to make a fight. And this time, they actually do it. Both camps sign a 2-fight deal. A date is set, August 14th, 2021. The venue, Saudi Arabia. And the site fee, the amount that Saudi Arabia negotiated simply to just host the event on their soil, is $155 million. Not the purses, the site fee. $155 million. Signed, agreed, and it was done. Eddie Hearn called it the biggest fight ever made. Fury himself posted publicly. The fight was 100% happening. Then, one day later, one single day, a retired United States federal judge named David Weinstein sits in an arbitration hearing in New York. Deontay Wilder, the American heavyweight Fury had fought twice, had a contractual rematch clause buried in his agreement with Fury's camp. Fury's team tried to walk away from it. Wilder's team disagreed. The case went to arbitration. The ruling? Fury must fight Wilder first. The Joshua fight, the date, the venue, the $155 million site fee was dead within 24 hours of being publicly confirmed. Fury wrote on Instagram, "What a joke. Looks like I'll have to crack his skull again." Bob Arum, who was Fury's US promoter, told ESPN, "We're not paying Wilder to step aside. It's better to get rid of him and go about our business." Fury fought Wilder in October 2021 and knocked him out in the 11th round. Obligation cleared. But the Joshua fight was gone again. Now think about what had just happened to the demand. The fight had been announced, celebrated, $155 million committed by the sovereign government. And it was destroyed. Not by a dispute over money, not by an injury, but by a contract clause that a retired judge enforced in an arbitration room in New York. The boxing public had watched the fight be signed, announced, and vanish inside 24-hour window. But the story didn't get smaller. It got bigger. That's death number 2. The largest single deposit yet into a fight that kept becoming more valuable every time it died. 2022. Both men are free, no obligations, no clauses, and no courtrooms. And then, both of them start losing. Fury lost to Alexander Usyk in May 2024. Joshua had already lost to Usyk twice. And in September 2024, Joshua walked into Wembley to his own crowd and was stopped in the 5th round by Daniel Dubois. Another incredible night if you haven't seen it. Two men who had once held every belt in the division, now both without titles, both on losing runs, and both in their mid-30s. By the conventional logic of boxing, the commercial case for this fight should have died with the belts. But it didn't, because of one man, Turki Al-Sheikh, the Saudi authority chairman who had been pushing for this fight for many years. He understood something that the traditionalists didn't. The belts had gone, but the story had not stopped growing. In December 2025, Joshua fought Jake Paul on Netflix in Miami, and he stopped him in the 6th round. Reports put Joshua's earnings at $92 million for a single night's work. 10 days later, Joshua is involved in a serious car accident in Nigeria. 2 members of his team are killed, the people who had been preparing him for the biggest fight of his career. It was tragic, and we must realize the personal impact. But it is a moment that adds a layer of human weight to this story that no marketing campaign can manufacture. And crucially, it does not kill the fight's commercial value. If anything, it deepens the narrative that's been building for 6 years. 4 months later, on April 27, 2026, Fury vs. Joshua is officially signed. Signed, sealed, delivered. AJ vs. Fury is on. The biggest piece of business we've ever done. That was Eddie Hearn. A fight between 2 men without titles, both in their late 30s, The £200 million event that the industry had been building towards and then repeatedly destroying for 6 years. Here's the insight that most boxing coverage has completely missed. In 2021, when both men were world champions, when the fight had the full commercial logic of a unified title bout, the Saudi site fee was $155 million. In 2026, when neither man is a champion, when both men are older, when both have suffered multiple defeats, each fighter is being paid £100 million. The fight is now worth more than it was when they were champions. How? Because the value of a fight is not determined by belts, it's determined by the story. Belts create the initial audience. The story sustains it. The story compounds it. 6 years of will this ever actually happen built a public that had a personal stake in the outcome. Not just boxing fans, but anyone who had watched the fight die and come back so many times that they needed to see how it ended. Netflix understand this. They did not put it behind a pay-per-view wall. They put it in front of every single one of their subscribers because they're not selling a boxing match. They're selling a conclusion to something. And here is the question that nobody in boxing has wanted to ask directly. Did every collapse make the fight more valuable? The Ruiz upset gave Joshua a redemption arc. The arbitration ruling gave the story a villain. The losses to Usyk gave both men something to prove. Every obstacle became a chapter. Every delay became a narrative. Every failure became a reason for the audience to stay invested. You can almost argue that the fight's greatest financial asset was not Fury's power or Joshua's legacy, it was the 6 years of waiting. One final thing. Before this story has a clean ending, it doesn't actually have one yet. On July 25th, 2026, Joshua will fight Christian Prenga in Riyadh. A tune-up. Fury will take his own warm-up bout before the main event. If Joshua loses to Prenga, the £200 million event does not survive it. 6 years of building, 4 collapses, a signed contract, and the entire structure still depends on a man in his late 30s winning a fight in Saudi Arabia in July. The November date is not guaranteed. The £200 million is not guaranteed. The story that took 6 years to build can still end before the final chapter. So, here is where this ends. Not with a prediction, not with a verdict on who wins, with a question that is bigger than the fight. Did boxing accidentally create a £200 million event by failing to make it happen for 6 years? Because if the answer is yes, and the evidence points that way, then something uncomfortable is true about how modern sport actually creates value. Joshua versus Klitschko was executed perfectly. A world title fight, on schedule, that delivered everything it promised, and it generated £50 million. Fury versus Joshua was delayed, killed, resurrected, killed again, and it survived upsets, courtrooms, lost belts, and personal tragedy. And it's now worth £200 million. 4 times the value, built on 4 failures. The conventional logic of sport says value comes from winning, from championships, from dominance. But the most valuable fight in British boxing history is not being sold on either man's dominance. It's being sold on 6 years of the audience wondering whether it would ever actually happen. That is not the Mayweather blueprint. Mayweather chose to delay. He manufactured scarcity deliberately. Fury versus Joshua was forced into the delay. The collapses were real. The courtroom was real. The losses were real. And yet, the financial result was the same, or bigger. Which raises the question that every promoter, broadcaster, and rights executive in global sport should now be sitting with. If failure, delay, and near collapse can generate more value than a perfectly executed event, what does that tell us about what audiences are actually paying for? They're not paying for the fight. They're paying for the story of whether the fight will actually happen. And in modern sport, that story, the wait, the doubt, the repeated disappointment, may be the most valuable product of all. I want to know your thoughts. Was the 6-year wait the making of this fight? And if the delay itself created the value, does that change the way that you see every big event that's taken years to happen? If this gave you a different way of seeing how value is actually created in modern sport, give it a like. It genuinely helps the channel grow. Subscribe to Sports Cash Files. Every week we dig into the money behind the sport. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.